All right, so we've got this very interesting passage in Isaiah about the suffering servant. There are several of them, but probably the one that most Christians are familiar with comes from Isaiah 53, where we've got, surely he's borne our infirmities and carried our diseases, and we counted him stricken, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So this guy's having a tough time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so
whoever that guy is, he's having a tough time. I know, yeah.
And growing up, I always heard this is a prophecy about Jesus.
Yeah. Understandably so.
It really sounds like Jesus.
It sounds very Jesus-y when you read this, right?
Yeah.
Even like dying at the end and coming back and things like that. It sounds very, very Jesus-y, so it's understandable, right?
Yeah, but it's not about Jesus.
Well, it can be understood in light of Jesus, but whether this is talking about Jesus, it really strains credulity. And this is where I think, engaging Jewish sources on talking about this. By the way, Jews were like really, have been historically all over the place in terms of like, who is this servant of the Lord who's doing these things? And there are differences of opinion on that.
Sure.
And there's one angle that I like that has made sense to me. I'm not saying it's the only one, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And that is the servant here. There are 4 of these, what they call servant songs in this part of Isaiah, starting in chapter 40. And this whole section of Isaiah is all about, you're in exile, but it's going to be over real soon, and you'll come back. It's very good news.
Yeah.
And you have this servant mentioned 4 times. And this is the last time we have the servant of the Lord, the servant of God. And one way of understanding the servant is not as a person, but understanding the servant as a people, and specifically the people of Judah who were exiled to Babylon. Now, were all the Judahites exiled? No, just some of them, the elite, right?
Some were left over.
Many were left over because the point of being exiled from the Babylonians wasn't, we want to clear out everybody. They want to leave people there that have to work the land, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. They're just taking the powerful and the influential out so you don't get any ideas about rebelling. And because, if your army and your government's taken away, you're probably just going to mind your own business and try to keep safe, right? But, so you have this whole context going on here. And in Isaiah 49, one of the other suffering servant passages, as it's called, there very clearly in verses 1 to 6, the servant is Israel.
It just comes right out and says it.
It just comes out. It gives it like it's a collective meaning, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, how can that be? But it says he, him, all this kind of stuff. It's singular. Well, it's metaphorical. I mean, this is the nature of especially poetic literature in the prophets. It's highly metaphorical, right? So if understood that way, we're reading a passage here that, again, according to this understanding, which is the one that I hold to, you have the Judahites who were exiled, and they suffered.
Yeah, greatly.
They suffered. And they suffered because exile was God's punishment for the people for disobedience in the covenant. But, interesting problem here. If it's to punish the people, only a small number of them are taken away into exile.
Yes.
So, what about the people who are left? They suffered for them. So their suffering paid for everyone's transgressions. I just think that's an amazing way of looking at it. Again, I didn't make this up. This is a very old interpretation.
Right. Yeah, so in verse 6, where it says, we all like sheep have gone astray.
We all like sheep have gone astray.
We've turned to our own way, which is nice that it rhymes in English, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
And the him is the exiled Jews. But it says him. I know it says him.
Right.
Think in terms of the use of metaphors, collective consciousness, things like that. It doesn't have to be one person. Now, it might be.
Right.
It might be. But that one person, I'm going to say it's not Jesus in this passage, because this whole section of Isaiah is all about the exile is coming to an end.
Right. It's hopeful.
To them.
For them in that time. Right. So you don't think it would be hopeful to people living 500 years before Jesus to say, I know you're upset right now, but in 500 years, there's going to be this guy.
And that's the thing. See, that's what moves me away from thinking of this as, let's say, in a strict sense, predictive of Jesus, because you've got this whole section in Isaiah that's about, I'm coming, comfort my people,
Yeah.
Speak tenderly to Jerusalem that her warfare is ended. She's paid double for her sin. She's coming back home. It's going to be great, right?
Right.
By the way, time out.
Yeah, it's going to be a minute.
Yeah, it's going to be now, a long time from now, which has nothing to do with what's happening, a long time from now, this is going to happen with this person who's going to be crucified.
Right.
And I don't think, honestly, for 1 minute, that's what the author has in mind.
Well, it does the people that the author is speaking to no good.
It does them no good. And that's the thing. Prophecy is not, let me show off what I know about the future that you can't possibly verify. It's the prophets, I mean, you know this better than I do. The prophets interpret the times for the people and saying, this is where God is in this. So that passage we just looked at is in that sense continually prophetic.
Nice,
right?
Yeah. Well, and I love that this passage is getting at, I would say, one of the two paradigmatic moments of the Old Testament. That's the Exodus being one, but the exile right here.
Yeah.
Because for these people, this was a death and a resurrection.
Right.
And so the people of God, in many senses, died. And when they came back, they were brought back to life.
It even says that in this passage. There's death involved. Well, but who can die and come back if not Jesus? Well, the exile people can do that too. That's in the book of Ezekiel, this prophecy of the dry bones, which is a prophecy. It's like, the bones are there, they're dried up, but then the sinews and the muscles, all of a sudden they're alive again. It's like, well, what is that? Well, Ezekiel tells you at the end of that passage, it's about coming back from exile and being a united people again, right?
Yeah.
So the metaphors work, and it is entirely proper to think of the exiled Judahites as being stricken and even dying. But then when they come back again, it's going to be a whole new beginning. It's going to be a resurrection of sorts. This is a big idea in the Hebrew Bible. I mean, John Levinson wrote a book about resurrection and light. I know. Isn't that a great book?
Yes, I love that book.
He's one of my heroes anyway.
He's the best.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's so much happening on the level of Hebrew Bible Israelite history in these passages that's so full of theology. We miss that theology if we just do this quantum leap into the New Testament period.
And I think we miss the richness of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we make the leap from here to Jesus.
Right.
Because what John Levinson does so well in that book is he shows you that the people of God are God's beloved son, right? And their death has to occur and their resurrection.
Right.
And so when he gets to the Gospels and Jesus is being baptized and God says, this is my beloved son, Levinson goes, you should know he's going to die.
Yeah, exactly.
Right there.
That's right.
You should know
That's
this
exactly
guy is going to die, because that's what happens to Israel.
Right.
And so this is a continuation, the Jesus narrative is a continuation of what's going on here.
Right. But it's not a prediction of Jesus.
Right.
It's a statement of what's about to happen. Prophets tend to speak in the relatively near future terms, right? Not hundreds of years, except in maybe a broad, ethereal kind of way, like the day when everything's going to be brought together. But usually, 5 years, 10, 20, 30 years, something like that. They can read the times. They're like really good economic forecasters saying, in 5 years, we're going to be in a depression if we don't stop this, right?
Yeah.
I think that's how prophets act. That's very much what's happening here. But it keeps being, I guess the technical term is actualized for people in different generations.
That's right.
This still speaks to them somehow. So when you get to the New Testament, well, no brainer, talking about Jesus, you're going to talk about this, but not as if this passage predicts Jesus.
Right.
It's more of a pattern that they say, well, Jesus actually embodies this too, about being stricken and suffering for others. And my goodness, it's happening again. And there's a different kind of exile that's being brought to an end here, right? I mean, that's deep, and that'll preach, as my Baptist friends say, right? So, but that's, you can't get there simply from saying, this is predictive of Jesus. It's obviously Jesus. It's not obviously Jesus.
No.
It's obviously something else. But it can be applied to Jesus. That's what I think.
I mean,
and I'm sure you agree 150%.
I 100% agree.
You would never disagree with me on anything.
No, I
Good.
do. I think that absolutely what we're seeing here is, if it's not those people, the Judahites that have gone into exile, it's some sort of a figurehead for them.
Yeah.
This is a text that is about ancient Judah.
Right.
And not yet about Jesus.
Something happening hundreds of years later. Right.